everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Book Isn't Necessarily Better, a podcast from the Community Library Network where we talk about books and their many adaptations. I'm your host, Mikayla, here with my co-host, Roxanne.
Hello.
And our special guest, Nathan.
I'm the information specialist here at the library. I deal with a lot of obscure information and trying to get people access to databases, things like that, and the interlibrary loans that come through Post Falls. Those all come through me. But I'm so glad I get to step out of that comfort zone a little bit and talk with you guys about the book not necessarily being better.
We're very excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
As you wish.
With that great segue, today we're going to be talking about The Princess Bride. You want to give us a quick introduction?
Okay, so I took a trip earlier this year, and like many people do, I looked for something on my bookshelf to take with me to read. And of all the things that I looked at, The Princess Bride was sitting there, nice paperback copy, easy to throw in my bag. So I threw it in my bag, and I went off down to Mexico and read it on the beach. And as I'm reading it on the beach, like a total geek, I start with the introductions, and I fall in love with this introduction of this book, which is just so awesome. I've always loved the movie. There's only like 5 movies that I will watch over and over and over again. My wife will watch everything multiple times, but I'm like down to 5 because that's just the way I am. Mm-hmm. And The Princess Bride is on that list. And so as I'm reading this book, I get just engrossed in this introduction. Like many people, I'm willing to suspend belief while I'm reading, which, if you read the introduction, can cause you some issues. So when I got back, I'm talking with Roxanne about this introduction.
This was great.
And I'm like, oh, this is just crazy. Like, there's this museum, and like Andre the Giant went to it, and then like the author was like, what? There's a museum? So then he has to go check it out, and all this stuff. And I come to find out that like none of it's true, and I've just been like totally taken over by this concept for the last week while I was on vacation.
And I totally believed you. I was like, that's insane. Oh my gosh, it's actually based on a real story. And you're like, yeah.
And you're like, where is it? I want to go see it. And so I like Google it, and that's how I find out that like this whole thing is a fabrication. Mm-hmm. And it's just so beautifully done. Like the book's, it's okay, and the movie is great, but this introduction and setup to this book is just it's such a wonderful masterpiece of storytelling and satire that it's perfect for the topic of the book.
Yeah. So is it true that he kept adding introductions, and like he would put out different editions of the book with more introductions, or how did it work, and what did the introductions say really?
Okay, so the copy I read was the 30th anniversary edition. So it has three introductions. There's
3 introductions.
Yeah, there's like the original opening chapter, and then there was the 25th anniversary edition introduction, and then the 30th anniversary introduction. And so he's got them laid out in that you read the 30th first, and then the 25th, and then that opening chapter before he gets into the story of the Princess Bride. The one that has all the fencing and fighting and torture, revenge, giants, monsters, chases, escapes, true love, and miracles.
Great summary.
Peter Falk couldn't have said it better.
I know, it's crazy. But by the way, we have a coworker who said her husband would not like this movie. And I said, are you kidding me? This movie was made for dudes because of all of those things. Mm-hmm. So Mitch, if you're listening, you need to watch the movie. It's just something you need to do. And in fact, my wife's first on-screen crush was the Dread Pirate Roberts. So I didn't find that out until a couple weeks ago. Took me back. I'm like, what?
I thought you were going to say Mandy Patinkin for sure.
No.
I was going to say, is it mine? Wallace Shawn?
No.
So apparently all these years, we've been married 20 years now, all these years I've been being measured against the Dread Pirate Roberts, which is a boost to my ego. So, But the introductions to the book, it starts out with this 30th anniversary introduction. It talks about legal troubles that William Goldman is having with the Morgenstern estate. And then it talks about this existence of the Morgenstern Museum.
And who is Morgenstern?
Morgenstern is the fictitious author of The Princess Bride. So the framing of the book and the story is, and the movie as well, is that there's this great author, S. Morgenstern, who wrote this classic tale of true love and high adventure. And William Goldman falls in love with this story because his father reads it to him while he's sick.
And that's where you got me. I looked up in the catalog to read this before we came to talk about it. And I was like, we don't even have the original Princess Bride. We only have the abridged good parts edition. And Roxanne was like, oh, that's so weird. We don't have the original. It's the original. It just has layers and layers and layers of fake stuff wrapped around it.
Man, he got us all so good.
He really did. Yeah.
Well, Goldman got me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, they talk about the existence of this Morgenstern Museum. Andre the Giant tells about how, like, he held his hand up to the casting of the original Fezzik's hand, and Andre the Giant's hand was small. There's all these little details that are in this introduction. He sets up this pretext that Stephen King told him he needed to go, which plays again at the end of the book. It talks about his grandson and about Inigo's father's sword on display in front of the museum, and like all these kids looking at this sword, just completely enamored by the experience. You can see Buttercup's dress and the life-sucking machine and all this stuff. So he talks about that in this 30th anniversary edition because the premise is that he's now visited the museum, right? But in the 20th anniversary edition, the whole thing is discussed about, like, experts in Florinese history are like taking issue with his abridgment, and it becomes this like really high-minded discussion of like what they're taking issue with, and he goes more into his childhood memories of his father reading the book to him, and how he writes the screenplay and how it gets buried, and how he fights for the rights to obtain it again, and how Rob Reiner then picks it up and makes the movie. So like that 25th anniversary edition really centers around how the movie itself was made. And then you come to the original opening chapter, which talks about how this story captured his imagination and made him the writer he is today. So it's all these layers in these different introductions that are working together to create this giant hoax that I totally fell in. So.
And it's perpetuated by, did you read the Buttercup's baby
part
at the end? Okay. That ended up being my favorite part. There's also an introduction to like a fake first chapter of the second book called Buttercup's Baby. And in the introduction, he claims that his legal troubles with the Morgenstern estate have caused them to ask Stephen King to write the adaptation. And he's so upset that Stephen King is going to write this adaptation instead of him. It's hilarious.
That's amazing.
But at the same time, he understands that he's like, Stephen King, whatever he publishes, it just sells a ton of, so why wouldn't they go with him? So he's like torn. He's like, I understand it from their business perspective, but this was my baby. I did this abridgment. I should be the one to continue. Eventually, Stephen King acquiesces and says, try the first chapter.
Right.
And that's how we get Buttercup's Baby.
We're also supposed to be getting, or he alludes to the fact that he might be adapting the whole Buttercup's Baby, but that has yet to materialize, right?
Yeah, there's no Buttercup's Baby at this point.
Right. I don't think he's written a novel, in fact, in like almost 20 years.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything other than a few screenplays that he's done. That's what he's more known for, is his screenplays.
Yeah, he worked on some pretty big ones.
He did Butch Cassidy in the Sundance Kid.
Yes.
Yeah. And did you guys...
And Misery. He did Misery.
Oh, and so he worked with Rob Reiner.
And Stephen King. And I think that's why he's allowed to just name drop Stephen King in this fake history.
Did you guys hear how he got the title Princess Bride?
No.
He was telling a bedtime story to his two daughters, and he said, okay, girls, what do you want to hear a story about? And one said princesses, and one said brides. So he said, okay, this is the Princess Bride.
Great background story. I did find a really interesting genre associated with this. Have you guys heard of ruritarian romance?
No, do tell.
Yeah.
Please.
It's a genre where the book or film or whatever it is set in a fictional country. There's usually some sort of like swashbuckling adventure, a lot of high romance and intrigue. It's often about like the ruling classes having usurped political power or trying to restore legitimate government after some sort of like dictatorship. Some other examples were like Marvel's Victor Von Doom, The Grand Budapest Hotel. Ursula K. Le Guin apparently writes a lot of ruritarian romance.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. It's something for you to drop to your friends. You'd be like, yes, this is a great example of ruritarian romance. You'll sound very smart.
And they'd say, Gesundheit.
Or like you have a bunch of marbles in your mouth.
Yeah,
Ruritarian.
Did you guys know that, full disclosure, I looked up all the facts you didn't know about The Princess Bride. And so because I did not read the book, this is what I have to contribute. Did you know that the countries that they mention are named after coins? So florin.
Florin, that makes sense, but I've never heard of a guilder.
Yeah, I feel like it's an old one. It sounds Germanic.
Well, and that would make sense since it's a ruritarian romance.
Oh,
they're also typically set in like fake European countries.
Just like The Princess Diaries.
Yeah. Ruritarian romance, right there.
Was that Genovia?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, why do you
know your
this?
princess?
I'm married. I got kids.
He's got a daughter. My next question was, what is your favorite quote from the movie? Because you also like the movie, right?
I love the movie. Like I said, it's like one of the 5 that I will watch again.
It has great rewatch value.
But as far as like my all-time favorite quote from the movie, I think it has to be when Humperdinck and Wesley are there towards the end, and Wesley's laying in the bed, and Humperdinck comes in the room. They're talking about how they're going to battle to the death, and Wesley goes, "No, to the pain," and goes into this whole diatribe about what to the pain is. I think that it's just such a interesting point in the narrative, and so creative to skirt around this cliche idea of a battle to the death and like flip it on its head and have it be a battle to the pain.
I leave you in anguish.
Yeah.
So that when small children see you, they'll say, "What is that?"
Yeah.
Hideous thing. Yeah.
Leave the ears just so you can hear. You know, it's just so great. And that's probably my favorite quote in the movie is "No to the pain."
Lovely.
What about you, Mikayla? Do you have a favorite quote?
I have a couple things. I mean, I can quote most of this whole movie. I've seen it numerous times throughout my life. Always been a family favorite. I love Inconceivable. I love everything about Vizzini. I'm sad that he's only in like the first third of the movie.
Yeah, he has about, 10 minutes of screen time?
Yeah. So very sad because he is hilarious. And he's always called like the Devil Sicilian in the book, which is cracking me up. I'm not quite done with it. And luckily he's not dead yet. Hooray. So I love that. My dad always used to like read all of our essays and like help us with stuff. And he would always say, "I don't think that word means what you think it means." So he would always use that as like a quote for like our school stuff.
I love Wallace Shawn. I wasn't kidding. I have a crush on him. He went to Harvard. Fun fact about Wallace Shawn.
I did not know that.
Yeah, he also was a lecturer on American and English literature at Oxford for a semester.
So he probably does actually know what that word means.
Yes, I bet he does know what that means. And also, he doesn't have a Sicilian accent because he just couldn't do one.
Okay.
And he also felt really insecure about being cast in this part because Danny DeVito was originally supposed to be playing Vizzini.
Can you even imagine?
He would have been fantastic.
I don't know.
I think it would have been totally different.
Cast it
I think it's
perfectly.
perfect.
They did cast
casting.
it perfectly, but I think Danny DeVito also would have been great. But Wallace Shawn felt very insecure about this, knowing that Danny DeVito almost did it. I think he dropped out because he was in Twins or something.
Some lesser known film, not a cult classic. Carrie Elwes wrote a book called As You Wish, Inconceivable Tales from the Making of The Princess Bride.
Oh,
I heard about that. I want to read. I think it came out kind of recently.
Yeah, 2014.
Okay, not so recently.
Recent-ish,
but
last decade.
it's not that long ago for a timeless tale of love and high adventure.
no.
Right. I also cracked up when in one of those introductions, he was talking about how conceited it was for S. Morgenstern to call it a classic tale before it had even been published, which obviously he actually did in real life, which I think is just wonderfully meta. I love it.
Yeah, when I was at the beach reading that, being a book nerd, I was like, oh yeah, that is like really, really hubristic for him to do that. And then the whole time I'm thinking, oh yeah, man, that's just really weird that he did that. And then I come back and find out that the whole thing's a fabrication. So of course, why wouldn't he do it, right? Because he's fictitious. Yeah, very, very cool.
Mm-hmm. It's like how we say that this podcast is going to become a classic that will be taught in podcasting classes in the future, but that's just true, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No comment.
No comment. Okay.
You're never guesting again.
Oh, man.
Anything else that's different between the book and the movie? Should people read one first and then watch it, or is there an order you suggest? I wasn't as impressed with the book as I was with the movie. The actual meat of the book that the movie follows, it's pretty close to the movie. There's a few things that are additions, and some of the backstory is in there as well. But as far as the storytelling goes, it's really tough to beat this movie. The framing of the book, however, with those introductions and then the discussion about Buttercup's baby at the end, you just need to read those. Yeah.
Even if you skip reading the book, read those introductions, because they're so amazing, especially when you know that this is used as a framing tool for the structure.
Right.
It becomes really cool. I also like how, like, when I was watching it the other day, like, some of the stuff is just so cringy to us now. I mean, this movie came out in 1987.
Right.
So, like, the sounds that the ROUSs make.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just like, oh, that is such a cringeworthy sound. Like, I mean.
And what does that stand for?
Rodents of unusual size.
I don't believe they exist.
Did you know that those rodents of unusual size was played by a 4-foot tall man in a 50-pound rat costume? There are some points where you see Carrie Elway's just wrestling with a costume.
Oh, interesting. Because there's also a part where you see the rat, like, pull his head back on, like it's about to fall off, and you can see him, like, grab it and put it back on his face.
But I mean, there are a lot of, like, mistakes in the movie as well. Like, rocks moved when they're doing the fight scene with Fezzik and the Dread Pirate Roberts.
Right.
I mean, rocks are moved so that Fezzik can fall down. Voices are put in. It's the typical 80s stuff that they missed when producing movies. So.
Sure. It's some of the charm of that movie, though, right?
Oh, definitely. So when we were talking the other day, you mentioned something about the song at the end credits.
Oh,
I love
was
that
me.
song.
I love it. Your love is like a storybook story.
Don't love and lie. A storybook. It sounds exactly like that.
It does. You have to watch the credits of this movie. It's an absolute must.
So when I watched it last night, I made sure that I listened to this song.
Uh-huh.
I hate that song.
It's awful. It's abysmal.
It is the cringy 80s ballad.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love it.
Me too.
But
I love it because it's bad.
it was nominated for the Oscar of Best Song.
No way.
Yes. It lost to Lost in Time from the Dirty Dancing movie.
Inconceivable.
I don't think you know what that word means.
It's a great fun fact.
So, I couldn't understand why you guys liked this song. So please explain it to me.
I like it because it's bad.
Okay.
It, like, encapsulates that whole, because this whole movie is very campy. Now, I'm sure it probably looked pretty good when it came out, but now I find this movie very campy. It's just kind of like a fun family romp, so that really bad song at the end of it just cements the whole feeling of that experience for me.
Okay.
Roxanne?
Yeah, it's just,
Okay.
I just love it. It's just good. I think it really gets to, like, some childhood, like, I love this movie when I was a kid, and so it's
got some nostalgia
bringing me back.
factor.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. The lyrics just didn't make sense to me.
I was just like, so ridiculous.
Maybe I should look at it more as a framing technique that they used for the movie, similar to how they did for the book.
Exactly.
Maybe then I'll come around to it.
So what I'm talking about, some of the weirder characters. There's some really big names in this movie. Like Billy Crystal plays Miracle Max. And one thing I read about him is that for his makeup, he brought in 2 photos for the makeup people. One was of a baseball player, and I'm not a sports person, but you might know who Casey Stengel is. Do you know who he is? Anyone?
Oh, yeah, big sports person.
Apparently
no.
like he looks how like, might sound. Like, if that sound was a person. Like, I found pictures of him, like, pointing, like, looking like he gestures a lot when he talks. So just Google Casey Stengel. He also brought in a photo of his grandmother. And he said, make me a combination of these 2 people.
Wow.
Have you seen a picture of his grandma? Did he get close?
I mean, I just imagined Billy Crystal 50 years older with a wig on.
Okay.
His wife in there, I don't know who plays her.
Carol Kane.
Carol Kane. So I love how he's like, or she's like, witch, I'm not a witch, I'm your wife. I mean, it's just such a great line. And there are so many great lines in this movie. When you watch it, you're like, oh, that is such a great line. And the lines are in the book too, but the way the characters in the movie deliver them is just, it's like a piece of chocolate cake.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you know that? So Billy Crystal had 3 days on set to do his one scene, and filming 10 hours a day each day, he ad-libbed the entire time and never made the same joke twice.
That's cool. So it's just like the best of the best you're getting in the actual film cut.
That was safe for a family film. Apparently most of it was not safe for a family film.
Okay.
He just did it to make everyone laugh.
That makes sense.
Oh, I want to see those outtakes.
Yeah.
I know.
They've got to be somewhere, right?
Okay, guys, here's your mission. Find the Billy Crystal Princess Bride outtakes and deliver them to us.
It's possibly 30 hours.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We will pay you in undying gratitude and possibly chocolate.
Hey, you can take anything you want out of the library
Oh yeah.
on your card.
For free.
For free.
Other big names in the movies? We've talked about a couple of them.
Oh, Christopher Guest.
Oh yeah.
Which
yeah.
didn't even occur to me until about halfway through the movie. I was like, oh my gosh, that guy looks familiar. Christopher Guest, who is the genius behind mockumentary movies like Best in Show, A Mighty Wind.
This is Spinal Tap.
This is Spinal Tap, which Rob Reiner loved, the director.
I'd say This is Spinal Tap is second to this movie in my list of like comedy favorites. Great movie.
We're going to get in trouble naming off names because there are so many great names in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, my favorite, because I'm looking at it from a guy's perspective, is Andre the Giant. I mean, he is just, after reading the book, he just epitomizes that character. And there were so many other people that were up for that role. I believe I read somewhere like Arnold Schwarzenegger was interested in it at one point. And there were a couple of other actors that were interested in it as well. But landing on Andre the Giant, I mean, it was just so beautiful. And he just did such a wonderful job with it, playing this character that was that was just massive and huge, but also lovable and relatable. It's one of the greatest castings in the movie as far as I'm concerned. And it ties back to that whole 80s culture thing too. I mean, he was so big in the 80s.
Huh.
So Nathan, you would recommend both the book and the movie to people?
At least the introduction of the book.
Sure.
At least. I mean, if you're really into it, read the book because it's good too. You won't be disappointed, but read that introduction because it is the icing on the cake.
I do want to ask you really quick while we have you. It is National Poetry Month this month. So I know this is a little bit of a segue, but I know you're also a big fan of poetry. So are there a couple of poets or works of poetry you'd like to highlight for us?
Yeah, so when you approached me about this the other day, you were like, oh, your favorite poets. There's no way I could narrow down my favorite poets. There's just so many, and they're so different.
I believe what I said was, you're on a boat with all your favorite books of poetry, and it's going down, pick 2.
And I told you we'd have to pick ones that I hadn't memorized already. So, so I'm going to talk about 3 different poets, and they're local poets. And that's why I'm going to talk about them. One is Mark Anderson. He was the Spokane Poet Laureate for 2019. He did the Lit Crawl in Coeur d'Alene in 2019. He advises with me on the North Idaho Literary Arts Committee. And he also helped us with our Teen Summer Writing Program.
Sounds like a cool guy.
Oh, he's so great and so generous with his time. I took my youngest to the lit crawl, pre-COVID, and my youngest just fell in love with his ode to a jellyfish. And so it's so great. Check out Mark Anderson. That's Mark with a K, Anderson with an O-N. Another one is Stephen Pitters. Stephen Pitters is a Spokane poet. He also does the radio program Poetry Rising every week. He was one of our authors when we did author sound-off events in 2018. And we're currently working to plan a virtual program with him for Poetry Month. So I don't know if that will have come out by now, but certainly look at that through the library's social media channels. The third one that I'm going to tell you about is Maya Jewel Zeller. She teaches at Central Washington University, and she helped with our first teen summer writing program. What I like about Maya Jewel Zeller's poetry is it's also a feast for the eyes because she focuses on ekphrastic poetry, which is poetry written to explain a piece of art. So if you check out her books from the library, it not only has her beautiful words with it, but it also has wonderful pieces of artwork that she's collaborated with local artists on. So those would be my three recommendations: Mark Anderson, Stephen Pitters, and Maya Jewel Zeller for National Poetry Month.
Thanks for sharing. Those were, more than two that you saved, but they were definitely a worthy three.
It had a theme. They had to have a connection to the library and be local. So there you go.
I think that you exceeded expectations for that one. That's great. So we're going to wrap this up, I think. This has been another episode of The Book Isn't Necessarily Better. Thank you very much to our guest speaker, Nathan.
You're welcome.
And we will see you next time.
This is Roxanne, Mikayla, and Nathan signing off.
And that's how we get Buttercup's baby. And that's how we get Buttercup's baby.